welcome to Manufacturing NI's Meet the Makers podcast, where we speak to leaders who are shaping Northern Ireland's manufacturing and engineering sector. This series is run through Northern Ireland's Manufacturing Month, which is in May each year, and it's produced in partnership with eData, a project supported by Peace Plus, a programme managed by the special EU programmes body, otherwise known as SEU-PB. I'm particularly pleased today to be joined by Brian Irwin, who's a director of UD Irwin. There isn't a household across Northern Ireland who hasn't had the opportunity to enjoy the great products that Irwins are making in Portadown, feeding families right across Northern Ireland. In fact, just today at lunchtime, had the joy of having a bit of toasted Irwin's nutty cross bread, which I'm sure many other viewers and listeners will have done as well. Brian, I'm delighted you're able to join us today. I'd maybe just start by giving you an opportunity just to introduce yourself and introduce UD Irwin's business.
Well, I've been working in the industry since about 1976, and I have to say it's never a dull moment. In a way, whenever you're in food manufacturing, it's a position that gets you close to the consumer. You're making a real life product that is used every day, is appreciated. You can get a lot of feedback about your product, positive and negative, which makes the job much more real. You're not making an obscure minor part for a product far away. You're involved in a real life everyday need. So that gives us excitement and its own demands.
And Brian, it's more than that for me. This is a product that's in pretty much every household in Northern Ireland, and we all know that consumers are very discerning. They know the value of everything, not just the price of everything, and your product is very well regarded. So you're very privileged position to be in the centre of family homes and in family lunchtime and dinner tables as well.
It is it's a responsibility too, because people rely upon your product, rely upon the continued quality of it every day and availability. So very much you're driven on it, 6 days a week, fresh every day, pledged to the community. Now that's not only the retailers, who are incredibly important, but also the consumers. So you've a lot to do there. But food manufacturing is that type of immediate, exciting environment. Northern Ireland is really fortunate in that we have a very big food manufacturing sector. In fact, it's the biggest sector of all those manufacturing sectors. It's a backbone of Northern Ireland, and I'm proud to be part of that.
You should be proud about your leadership role in that sector as well. We'll maybe talk about that a little later. I mean, WD Irwin's is a family business. You're not the first generation involved with the business, but for you, were you always destined to be in manufacturing? And what inspired you to take your kind of first steps into that manufacturing community?
I was kind of late. Late's not quite the word. Slightly late getting the realization that what I wanted to do was to become involved in business. I had my few years at college, and then I came back home and was able to listen to the daily conversation around the meal table with my father and my brother. The challenges and the solutions to everyday manufacturing, everyday baking. And I found myself contributing to those conversations and getting involved and getting excited by it. So to get into manufacturing properly, I went back to university and did a master's in business, which is the right way to do things. Get experience and then go back for the relevant piece of education that's going to improve the knowledge that you've already got and equip you for the future. So it was those early days around the family meal table, getting involved and getting passionate about what the business was trying to achieve.
And you talked there about being around that family meal table with your father and your brother Niall, who's sadly no longer with us, obviously. And I mean, there's a lot said around a dinner table. Some of them good, some of them challenging, to say the least. But was there a piece of advice that your father or your brother or others in and around you at that time kind of gave you that's kind of stood by you through your business career?
One thing that stands out is my father always said, be persistent. Don't give up easy. Be persistent. And don't be afraid of your larger competitors. He said, they don't have a monopoly of brains in Belfast.
You're talking to a dairyman here, Brian. I would agree with that, obviously. I mean, certainly given the fact that your industry is largely dominated by very large bakers on the island and across these islands, and for a homegrown business like yourselves to kind of take those on, I think that kind of advice about don't be afraid of the bigger guys and be persistent is proven to be very wise advice. I mean, in a market as so competitive as yours, and in a market where there are big players with big budgets and potentially big firepower to take somebody like yourself out, I mean, how tricky has that been to kind of navigate the last, well, it's more than 100 years the business is there, but in terms of your leadership, how tricky has that been to kind of take on those large incumbents?
I think on the plus side, being in Northern Ireland is a good thing because the consumption of bread is a lot higher than it is in the rest of the British Isles. Highest consumption per head of the population. And I put that down to the fact that it's our diet, what we enjoy, but also the quality and variety of bread products is much higher than any other part of the British Isles. That helps you with your larger market and a discerning public who know what good bread tastes like, because for a lot of people in the past, there was a history of home baking in the family. So they knew what they liked, they knew quality. That continued on in the very large number of home bakeries that used to exist, and some still do, around the province, baking real good quality products every day. So Northern Ireland people knew their favourites, they knew their local specialities, and that gave rise to the demand for quality product. So those were very positive things. Also, being in Northern Ireland, we were a little bit protected from some of the early days of big supermarket retailing, because the big retailers didn't get over here until very much later. We sort of can count that back to when the first large English multiple arrived. But at the same time, Northern Ireland is not immune to the trends of bread retailing, bread wholesaling, and consumer diets. So the same type of forces were beginning to impact on us as well. Lower consumption, greater variety, very intense competition to supply the big retailers, large bakeries with national contracts that we had to compete against. So we always had to approach the market situation with a point of difference, with branding, with product quality, with types of product. And those sort of things meant that there was a continuing requirement for the differentiated product from a local supplier within Northern Ireland. And for some of those guys, size didn't protect. So we had a situation where if we go back, within my experience, there would have been 12 large bakeries right across the province. And now there's only 3. So all of the big guys have one by one come to the end of their life cycle. So there's not many left.
And I mean, you're a hugely significant business in terms of its turnover and its contribution to our food community and employment. There's about 250 people working in the business. But what it sounds like to me is that because you were smaller and you were closer to the consumer and what their tastes were and what their demands were, that allowed you to be nimble, fleet of foot, to move quickly in terms of those changing tastes or challenges. So size is one of the benefits that you had, despite the fact that you're still actually quite a large business in Northern Ireland.
You had to be nimble, and I think some of the other bakeries got quite streamlined in their product range and in their equipment setup. So their process was very much geared to a single type production. So something difficult or tricky or heavens above messy was not something they wanted to take on. So we were able to fulfill that requirement.
But the demands are still there from the consumer, which is they want cheap food, and that's
It also helped if you had a clever brother as a baker.
Well, we'll maybe talk about Niall in a little bit. We're all very fond of Niall. Obviously, consumers are still price sensitive, and they know the value of everything, as I mentioned earlier. And you can't be an artisan in this industry and serve the volumes of customers that you want. So there was a need to kind of learn from those bigger bakers, perhaps, and particularly in and around automation and producing more product, but maintaining that quality. I mean, how's that automation process been for you?
But the process of streamlining and automation has been continuous for 30, 40 years. The experience of seeing how people operated on the mainland, for example, was very, very helpful. You knew what was possible. And as you progress, you modernize a production line piece at a time. If you don't have the money for a brand new production line finish to end, then you do it in phases. You modernize each part of it in succession so that you end up with a really fast and efficient plant. But it takes a while. And I think that was where the experience of my brother came in, Niall, because he had experience of working in the larger bakeries in England, was able to bring those techniques and employ them here.
And obviously, we talked there about the importance of being fleet of foot and nimble in terms of being able to react to all of that. But it's also about being intellectually nimble and being kind of prepared to kind of really use knowledge and insight and craft in order to try to make sure you can compete and continue to be such a success. I mean, obviously, over the last, well, your business was born in 1912. I'm glad to say you weren't there at the beginning of it and you arrived much later. But I mean, that's more than 100 years of history in terms of the business. And you'll have seen all the challenges, two world wars, troubles here at home, COVID, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what way have you kind of approached that challenges and where do you get the resilience given the just the complexities of what's been happening in the world, what's been happening nearby, and what's happening particularly in and around food?
I think it's a true statement that people say that businessmen will always find a way through, and nowhere is that truer in our industry. The challenges that come along are just another challenge. So you got to employ your staff to find the best solution. You adapt as you go along. And whenever we look back at what our fathers and our grandfathers went through, they went through bigger changes than we did. Maybe didn't realize it at the time, but if you look back, the progression from horse-drawn transport to motorized transport, it's just but one. The rise in standard of living, freedom to travel, the improvement in infrastructure, so that it used to be a day's drive to get to Enniskillen, but now it's an entirely different concept. More recently, we've had the opportunity of all Ireland market. Not so long ago that the bread could not be traded across the border. You got to Newry and you stopped. That was it. Then for a while we had a sort of a half a border, but you had to have customs clearance. So there was an hour's queue each morning at the border to try and get the simplest of products over the border. So that sort of stuff was mind-bendingly big in the change. Opportunities opened up as well as challenges. What kept you going was knowing that your product was needed and you had to find a solution. Being a fresh daily product, you had to find that solution quickly. Every day you had to find a solution that day so that you could deliver tomorrow. We used to say that we were great at putting out fires. Just a pity we weren't better at fire prevention.
Very true. Very true. I mean, and my own experience with you is that you're incredibly open and generous with your wisdom, and you've provided that wisdom not just to me, but an entire industry. I mean, you've led the Northern Food and Drink Association. You've been recognised by your peers in terms of an outstanding contribution to that sector. I mean, lots of people in business are fearful of sharing, of collaborating, of working together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the sense that I get from Brian Irwin. Now, not directly with your direct competitors, of course. That's a whole different game. But for you, how important is it that manufacturing leaders collaborate? And maybe just extending on from that, how do you think that relationship with government has been? Because governments tend sometimes to get in the way of people like yourself being able to be successful Do you think our government could be doing better in terms of not just talking with, but actually probably listening to the food industry and manufacturing more general?
First of all, I think businesses will always be improved by talking to each other. Whether they're in the same sector or very different sectors, you always learn something from the next business guy. And people are keen to share experiences because that's how they solve their next problem. And their next problem is one that the other guy had last week. There's also a necessity for business to talk amongst themselves in a way as a support structure. And that way we feel that we're not alone. There can be a lot of stress running a business, which is not ever acknowledged, but those people need to be able to share their experiences with each other. And I'm sure you've seen it at the various meetings where business people get together. They do like to talk. As regards government absolutely needs business to talk to them because they don't know how to run the industry. They're not sure on how the initiatives that they think are going to be an improvement are actually going to go down, how they're going to work. So they need us to tell them how to affect change in a proper way. So if we don't tell them, of course, they're going to make even worse mistakes. Sadly, a lot of government action is designed to use industry to see them as a cash cow for get more taxes, more levies, make them pay seems to be the general theme. So we've seen a lot of charges and fees being generated for industry in theory to control some aspect of the way we work. It might be carbon emissions, it might be water emissions, and it's just tax after tax in an effort to supposedly control. But actually what they're doing is they're trying to fund things that they don't want to raise other taxes for. And that's rather reprehensible because it gets away from good governance.
It does, and I know it's a frustration for everybody in business that you've articulated incredibly well there. That actually there's stuff being done to, not with business, that's getting in the way of businesses being successful and creating the work, and actually in return creating more taxes through employment taxes and the spend that people are contributing as well. You said something there which is it's already becoming a bit of a theme in and around these podcasts, which is if something's going wrong, or if there's a challenge or a problem or an issue, everybody in the business turns around and starts looking at Brian Irwin and saying, "Well, you're the leader here. You're in charge. You must have all the answers." And it's an incredibly lonely place to be. And I know, and apologies if it's sensitive to you, but I know yourself and your brother Niall had an incredibly strong relationship, as brothers do anyway. But the fact that you were in business together as well, and you respected each other's particular expertise and skill, and respected each other's character. I mean, losing Niall would have been difficult, I'm sure. But in those times of difficulty or crisis, who does a leader like you now turn to if you don't have that brother sitting there alongside you?
Well, you're blessed with a good management team. So the strength of the business is in the strength of the management team. So they're the guys that we rely upon. It's difficult to have the same relationship as you might have had with your brother. But don't forget that one of the reasons why the relationship was strong is that you're very different.
Yeah.
So there was a nice challenge there all the time. So he was always the best sales guy and I was always the best baker. But yet those were the other guys' jobs. I think maybe you neglect the fact that whereas we can be very critical of government and with good cause, there's a lot of government can be very helpful as well. And there's a lot of, support agencies and support packages there to help people. Sometimes it can be a little bit admin heavy and very bureaucratic, and you got to do it their way, which sometimes negates the point. For example, the old rule used to be that if you really needed a grant, you're not going to get one. You've got to prove that you don't need it so that you do get it. And it seems slightly bizarre, but a company that's truly in need is maybe unable to be grant aided. So you've got to prove you've got a fine line to tread between being absolutely in need of the money, which case you shouldn't be doing it anyway, and not needing it at all, in which case you don't get it. The assistance is best given in terms of advice and opening up avenues. So government have a lot to do there, and I think at the moment there's a plethora of information coming out. You're involved in some of the work on smart data and manufacturing 4, and that type of help is valuable to businesses. And part of it is getting businesses to communicate with each other, so we learn collectively.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you kind of raised that kind of digital transformation piece. Obviously, as a business that is highly automated and is fractions of fractions can make an enormous difference to what you're producing each day, and as a result, making sure that the product is out there at a price point that the consumers are wanting to pay, never mind able to pay. I mean, can you kind of give us a wee insight into the type of things that are happening within WD Irwin's that are kind of driving that digital agenda for you?
Well, I would say that we're probably still a long way to go on a digital journey. Lots still to do, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we know the direction we're going in. And there's been a huge amount of work done already in streamlining admin for a start. The ability to computerize your production control systems, feeding into materials control and then into margin control and margin analysis. That's been immensely helpful, and then helps you run and direct the business, because with the better the data, the better the decision. On the machines side, robots are with us now. We could do with more of them. Little bit of a tricky scenario is trying to integrate older machinery processes with modern robots. So you got an old production line and a modern robot, and there can be a little bit of difficulty there in making the interface work. But without doubt, it's the future. You also need to have a reasonable level of throughput to justify the expense. Although with the price of the digital equipment, the robots coming down all the time, it's much more affordable.
I think that drive towards achieving greater productivity is best demonstrated in the food industry. Actually, you're producing many millions of the same things each year. It's been much more tricky and later to adopt in terms of other parts of manufacturing. But you guys, the industry's been forced into that productivity piece.
Doubtless, and it's needed, because in some industries the margins are really, really fine. So you need to have better and tighter controls, more accurate cutting and weighing and processing. The difficulty for some parts of the food industry is that the returns are modest, to say the least, to be able to afford the capital investment needed for that. So it becomes a challenge.
And that's where government should be stepping in and really assisting in terms of assisting with the kind of capital requirement. The one thing that kind of, obviously your family name's above the business's door, and that's the same for the vast majority of our manufacturing community. They're family run businesses, and most people out there think that business is this big amorphous thing run out of power blocks in the United States, and it's spreadsheets, and it's no real connection to the place. I mean, that community element of your business is really important, I know, to you, because you live in the community, and the impact that business can have here.
There's so many businesses across Northern Ireland just like that. There's businesses in every town land, particularly in food, and we can even see the evolution of new businesses coming up. The guys making specialized soups, give an example, going into specialized condiments. There's loads of lovely new companies starting up, addressing specific segments with that small company dedication on quality, differentiation, and getting into niches. And that's a big strength of Northern Ireland. But in all of those companies, there's stability given to the community. They are the cornerstones of society, in my view, going forward. And there's a lot of companies our size as well, who've been about for a long time and doing great things, finding new markets. So that to me is a strength of Northern Ireland economy. At the same time, we've got to have the big guys, the big processors who are able to deliver the volumes of product, whether it's meat or poultry or cheese or milk or dairy of some sort. All of those big companies add to the overall picture. They're not the complete picture, but they give Northern Ireland food manufacturing real weight and heft. So we've got this blend of community-based family companies growing and extending and being invented. It's a nice, if you like, evolutionary procedure going on there. And we also have the big guys supporting the massive investments required. And some of them are American too.
And I always recall talking with yourself and Niall on this about a real appreciation from yourself and the family about the dignity of work, the difference that a job makes to an individual, it makes to a family, makes to a community, and the stabilizing effect that a job actually has on a community as well. I mean, we lived through very difficult times. Your business was putting vans on the road and dropping bread around the whole of Northern Ireland. But actually, the dignity of work and the place that work has and actually stabilizing this place is often overlooked, I think.
I think you're right that it is sometimes overlooked, but it shouldn't be a surprise. And whenever we're giving out our 25-year watches and our 40-year presentations, you can see how um, a steady job, a good steady income has enabled people to build family lives, buy houses, send kids to college, have them come back, raise whole communities on it. That shouldn't be surprising. At times it is. And we also find that all of our workforce, they come in to work. They know what they got to do. There's a stability in that. Sometimes things aren't as stable at home. There can be all sorts of things going on that people go through in periods of their lives. Young families come along. Loveliest thing in the world, but my goodness, it's stressful. So what that guy, that lady doesn't need is, they don't need another form of stress. But any decent employer will see not only the employee, but they see the person, the family person within that employee and all the stuff that they have got to manage in their life. And we can help in that.
Brian, you talked at the beginning about the kind of advice that you got when you were starting out from your father. But in terms of in the 40 odd years since and the experience that you've had, I mean, what are the kind of key lessons for you from that experience that others are maybe just starting out and need to really understand?
Well, I don't know if anything that I've learned is worthy of repeating, but it seems like a good idea as you go along in business life to show respect to people around you, to respect your employees, respect your customers. Is a very helpful thing to do if you want to make the sale the next day, but also respect your competitors in a very careful way. Those sort of things, as well as the element of being persistent. If you're certain what you're doing, don't back down. Be persistent.
And obviously you mentioned that over the years that tastes have changed and things have kind of moved in the food industry and the demands of the consumer has changed and stuff. For you today, what does the future look like? What's now for UD Irwin that means that we're going to continue to see your great products on the shelves?
We've got to keep on our persistence on quality. People get real joy from products and they expect it, and they're going to know the next day if it's not quite on song. So that's number one important thing to do. For the future, I think we've got to be more responsive to consumer needs and perceptions. So that comes into perceptions of health and nutrition, and bread can do a lot of good things there. Bread is sometimes a little bit misunderstood. It's a big source of protein. It's a big source of fiber. It's a very low source of sugar. It's a negligible source of fat. There's a lot of good stuff about bread. We're packed full of calcium and iron and vitamins, soon to be folic acid. There's lots of good stuff for families in ordinary bread. For the future is communicating that and adapting to the new health perceptions. More fiber, more protein. If you're going to have carbs, if you're going to have a luxury item, make it really good. That's what people want.
Absolutely. Brian, can I wrap up a bit for you now and for us all? If your father, yourself, and Niall were sitting around that meal table, and someone that was just arriving into our manufacturing community joined you for that meal, I mean, what would be the piece of advice you would give them in terms of inspiring them, in terms of making sure that they're a success, just as successful as WD Irwin's has been?
I would say don't go into the food business if you want an easy life. But if you want a rewarding life and one about which you can be passionate about your product, and business is one of those, it's an exciting type of entity. It can go all sorts of ways. You can grow and extend and diversify. You can be involved in takeovers. You can generate wealth. You can generate jobs. You can find new fields. You can get a really rewarding experience. It's not going to be a dull existence, but you got to keep your mind open and you got to be prepared to get stuck in. So I think it's a really rewarding type of employment. But the one thing about food manufacturing is it's needed. It's needed every day, everywhere. So you've got a continuing need, and you've just got to run with the trends and flow of consumer demand, a little bit of government regulation and change. It's all going to be imposing itself on you, but you have a consistent demand there on the consumers all over, and you can continue to meet that.
Brian, we'll wrap up, but just to say a couple of things, I suppose. Like, firstly, thanks for your leadership, not just in terms of your own business, but the food sector in particular, but manufacturing more generally. You're incredibly generous with the wealth of your wisdom, as I said earlier. I'm very happy to share it, and today's been a great example of that as well. The other thing that we didn't even get to talk about, but your potato bread actually has potato in it. Might sound odd.
The name says it. You can't call it potato bread unless you have potato in it.
Well, that's exactly my point, is that a lot of the product that we get is led by the flour element, the mills, rather than necessarily the potato. But if ever there was a story that told you about the attention to quality, it's the fact that the best potato bread out there, which I eat every Saturday, is from Irwin's. Thank you so much for your time, Brian. And I know that the business will be continuing success. I know that your own family and Niall's family are involved in the business now as well. So the future generation is well set to ensure that we'll all be able to continue to enjoy our nutty crust and our actual potato bread and our little jammy joes and everything else that comes with the wider business. But we really appreciate your leadership and your time. And thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.